Okay, we're going to get started because it's 7:03 and I always like to start my meetings on time and including this forum. So folks can pick up wherever we are, and well, I think I'm going to start now. Click these people in. Okay, welcome to the Mount Vernon School Board Candidates Forum. The purpose for this forum is to provide the public an opportunity to meet the 3 independent candidates to represent the Mount Vernon District on the Fairfax County School Board. We do have a few important rules. If you would make sure you mute yourself, raise your hand if you would like to ask a question, and you can also use the chat box. We do ask you to be respectful and courteous, and if not, you will be removed without warning. Don't interrupt, and the forum is being recorded. Okay, so I'm going to provide you with some other general rules, and that is the forum will last. Wait a minute. The forum will last approximately 90 minutes from open to close, including all introductions and conclusions. And for everyone's information, no questions or subject areas were provided in advance to the candidates. So when they respond, they will be responding, quote, cold. The moderator will address questions to all candidates, but not all candidates will be expected to answer every question. The candidates will be determined in alphabetical order in which they will give their opening statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to each question. The moderator will lead a brief discussion and follow up if needed. The moderator and timekeeper will keep candidates informed of their elapsed time at 1 minute and 30 seconds and stop. The moderator will enforce the limits. Questions in the chat box will be monitored by a volunteer. The moderator reserves the right to review and select questions for appropriateness and to avoid duplication. The moderator will determine the order of responses. The moderator will determine the order for the closing statement unless the moderator determines otherwise. Closing statements are limited to 60 seconds, 1 minute. Okay. Sorry, gotta get in this. And the first thing I would like to do is I'm going to introduce the League of Women Voters, who is a nonpartisan group. And Arena, she has some information that she would like to share with you. So Arena, you're up.
Thank you very much, Queenie. And I'd like to thank the New Gum Springs Civic Association for putting this forum together. As Queenie mentioned, I am here on behalf of the League of Women Voters. And what we'd like to do is just share, for many of you, this information will be redundant or unnecessary, but on the chance that there are people who may be new or young voters or haven't really thought about issues beyond the school board, we wanted to make sure that information was presented here. So again, thank you, Queenie. As she mentioned, We are a nonpartisan, all volunteer organization. Our motto is empowering voters and defending democracy. We are a pro-voting rights organization, and we believe democracy works best when everyone is able to participate in the democratic process by being able to vote. The information that I'll be sharing with you this evening will include just what's going to be on the ballot in Virginia in 2023. As many of you know, Virginia is one of the few states that has a major statewide election every single year. And for people who move to Virginia from elsewhere, they're always surprised when right after an election cycle has ended, it seems, they're being bombarded again with election information. But we definitely want people to pay attention to this year's election cycle as much as any other election because of the important issues that will be decided. We will also review some important dates that you should be keeping in mind as we move through to the November 7th general election. We'll talk briefly about voter registration, which is one of our principal jobs. We consider voter registration and voter information two of our major pillars of our work. And then we may have time for just a brief question or two and then turn it over to the school board candidates for the rest of the forum. So this is everything that's going to be on the ballot in Fairfax County in November. And I often think it would be easier for us to discuss what's on the ballot this year by just saying everything, because honestly, everything will be on the ballot. There will be Virginia House of Delegates and Senate races for every one of our newly redistricted House and Senate districts. Some of you may have been redistricted to a new district, so just be aware of that as you're hearing information about candidates, it may not be the people that you have previously heard from. And then other very important offices, Commonwealth's Attorney, Sheriff, Board of Supervisors, both the chairman and our local district representatives, in addition to the offices we'll be talking about this evening, the school board. And then there's the often forgotten, but not to be neglected, Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation. So that's a lot of things on the ballot. And each of these, as we like to say, it's these local and statewide elections that are going to affect your daily life very much more than what necessarily gets decided in the presidential or the federal elections. Okay, so, whoa, sorry about that. So the important dates to remember is the first election that everyone will be able to participate is actually the primary, which is on June 7th, for which you must be registered to vote by May 30th. Early voting actually starts very shortly on May 5th and will run through June 17th. Now, there is an asterisk next to the primary because I did want to be sure everyone was aware that this year there will only be a single party that's having election for their candidates that will be running in the general election in November, and that's the Democratic Party. The Republicans have no contested offices, so they will not be holding a primary or a caucus. And we'll talk a little bit more about the caucus in just a moment. So the thing to remember about early voting, those of us living in the Mount Vernon area, which I assume is most of this audience because we're talking about Mount Vernon school board candidates, we're very fortunate because there is a close by early voting site at the Mount Vernon Government Center. It will be open from Monday through Friday from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. And then we'll also be open on 2 Saturdays, 9 to, I believe it's 4:30 or 5. And that'll be June 10th and June 17th. So there'll be a lot of opportunity to participate in that primary. If you want to request a mail ballot for the primary, you must request that by June 9th. The general election is November 7th. I have put voter registration deadlines for both the primary and the general election on here. Do remember, however, that now in Virginia, we have the opportunity to do same day voter registration, which means that if you're not registered, if you forget to do it, or it somehow slipped your mind, you can actually register the day that you go to vote at the primary or the general election. It does mean, however, that you will be casting a provisional ballot. We strongly recommend that people try to get registered well before and not wait for same day. Okay, so for the ballot, for the primary in the Mount Vernon area, these are the offices that you will be able to choose from. And again, remember, this year it's going to be limited to a Democratic ballot only for the primary. And it will include the Board of Supervisors Chair, Mount Vernon District Supervisor, the Sheriff, Commonwealth's Attorney, and there's a single House and Senate district that is part of the Mount Vernon area where there will be primary elections. Now, you'll see that what's not listed on here is the Mount Vernon School Board candidate, and that is because the Democratic Party is going to offer an opportunity for Democrats to vote for the candidates through a caucus process. And you can contact the Fairfax County Democratic Committee to get more information if you want to participate in that. But I did want people to be aware that that this particular office that we're discussing in tonight's forum will not be part of the primary process. It's a different process, the caucus. And this is the last important thing. You can do almost anything you need to in terms of registering to vote, making sure your information is correct and updated, getting information about which districts you are in through the citizen portal for the Virginia Department of Elections. It's an easy website, vote.elections.virginia.gov. You can also, through the magic of the internet, point your cell phone camera at the QR code that's on the screen right now, and it will take you directly to that site. Again, if you have children who have not yet registered to vote, if they're turning 18 before November 7th, you can use this link to get them register, and they can vote in the primary election as long as they're going to be 18 on or before November 7th. So do encourage your children and any other family members or relatives, friends that have not yet registered to vote. Please urge them to register ahead of time, and it's a very easy process, as I mentioned. Now, if you can only use the online site if you have Virginia driver's license. If you do not, there are paper voter registration forms both at the local county offices, district supervisor's office, and the public library. You can pick one and mail it in. And that's all I have for you. And I hope that this information was useful. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Anyone have any questions for Irina from the League of Women Voters? Okay. Thank you, Irina. We appreciate, the information. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So there you go. So we'll have her stop sharing her screen. So, Irina, did you take that off? Oops, that's not what I want.
I believe it stopped sharing already. No.
Okay. We still see your vote matters with you holding the sign.
Oh,
we do that. That's because you have it on speaker view, and she was the last person to talk. So if you just keep going, yeah.
Oh, okay. See, I told you that IT challenge.
No, that's just my that's just my screensaver.
Okay. Thank you. All right. The next item on the program for tonight is I am going to introduce to you the moderator for tonight. Our moderator tonight is Jaffe White, and Jaffe is a parent whose children attended Fairfax County Public Schools. As a parent, she became intimately involved in her children's education by becoming involved in the PTAs at Carl Sandburg Middle School and West Potomac High School. Mrs. White knows all too well the importance of advocating for students and parents. Coming from a family of educators, Mrs. White was able to navigate through the myriad of educational programs that were challenging and often not available to certain Fairfax County students. Mrs. White is the wife of Darrell K. White, pastor of Bethlehem Baptist Church. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie White.
Good evening, everyone. I also wanted to add to my resume and the proudness of a parent from Fairfax County who developed both of my daughters. One is an engineer. She has been working for the Navy shipyard in Newport News for over about 11 years now. She does have a master's as well. And I have our youngest daughter who attended VCU and William & Mary Law School. She received full academic scholarships at both of those schools. She passed the bar last summer, the first time, and she is working for McCandlish and Houghton in Richmond, Virginia as an associate attorney. So I do thank Fairfax County for giving my two daughters a great education. And as a mother, I made sure that they were educated well. And I do want to thank Fairfax County. That's why it was so important for me to be able to come here tonight and moderate this important forum. And I do thank Queenie for inviting me here, and I am so appreciative. Now it's time to meet our candidates. And so we will have a 2-minute introduction of their own of our candidates. And we're going to start in ABC order according to their last name, to be fair. So we will start tonight with candidate Mateo Dunn. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. White, and thank you to the League of Women Voters and the New Gum Springs Civic Association. I really appreciate the invitation to participate today. I am a longtime resident, a community leader, and a lifelong advocate for children, families, and educators. My wife and I moved to Fairfax County 20 years ago because we wanted our children to attend the best public school system in the world, Fairfax County Public Schools. We are a proud FCPS family. Our children attended FCPS from first grade onwards, Fort Hunt Elementary, Sandburg Middle School, and West Potomac High School. We're also a multicultural family. My wife is a second-generation immigrant whose parents emigrated from Cuba in the 1960s. Our kids learned Spanish as their first language and participated in the Spanish immersion program at Fort Hunt Elementary. My wife is an educator and the director of a local preschool. We're also a military family. My daughter is contracted with the U.S. Army, participating in the Army ROTC program at Virginia Tech, go Hokies. And my son has committed to the National Guard. He's currently enlisted in October, heading off to basic training in June. I understand the transformative power of education. During my senior year in high school, my father was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Our family struggled after his death, but through hard work and student loans, I graduated summa cum laude from Emory University and attended law school at Georgetown University. I'm a seasoned attorney and entrepreneur. I have established multiple small businesses. I helped to build a $400 million federal agency from scratch, and I led a comprehensive overhaul of a $2 billion agency. Currently, I serve as in-house counsel for a nonprofit. I'm a community leader who was named Supervisor Stork's inaugural Mount Vernon District Community Champion in 2018. And that's because in 2015, I co-led a coalition of advocacy groups and teachers unions to save high school sports, music education, and language immersion from elimination. I later played a leading role in a campaign to diversify revenue sources for FCPS so that we can reduce reliance on property taxes. I also co-led multiple school bond campaigns in the Mount Vernon District to fund the construction and renovation of public schools, including...
I'm sorry, but I had myself muted, so I thought you heard the first bell. I apologize. So, but you went way over because I kept ringing my bell, but I was muted. I'm sorry, but your 2 minutes are up.
Understood. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Now, before the next candidate speak, one of the rules that we need to state is that we will ask everyone to not display their partisan materials, including buttons, signs, and banners. So we wanted to help create a sense of nonpartisanship since the candidates are independent of any party. So if you have any signs, buttons, banners in your little space, cubicle, please remove them or blur them out some kind of way. It would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. And so now that I'm unmuted, so Jaffe, I'm sorry. And again,
No problem.
Mateo, I apologize for letting you go over because I had muted myself. Okay.
Thank you. And next, we will hear from Harold Sims. And remember, Brother Sims, that you have 2 minutes.
All right. Thank you so much. Good evening to everyone, to the New Gum Springs, the League of Women Voters, our current representative, Karen Corporate Sanders. Thank you so much for your work. Queenie Cox and our moderator, fellow Dems and citizens on tonight. My name is Harold Sims, and I'm running to represent the Mount Vernon District on the Fairfax County School Board. What you need to know is I'm an active member of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee, where I serve as a member of the Black Caucus, where I served as a parliamentarian. I currently serve as an active member of the Mount Vernon District Committee, where I serve as co-chair for community outreach, and I'm a member of the Social Justice Committee. I want to tell you something just a little bit for the next few minutes that I have left. I am the dream of my late grandmother, Josephine, who lived to be 97 years young. She was a descendant of a people who were enslaved here on a plantation in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And as a maid, well into her 80s, she took in laundry. I remember how she baked cakes just to raise money through the Black church to fund the civil rights movement. I still remember her stories about marching on Washington, D.C. with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She taught me what it meant to be resilient. As a woman who refused to give up and fought for basic human rights, to include the right to vote, to have basic education in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And for over 2 decades, because of her resilience, I have devoted my life to public service in the Commonwealth of Virginia. As a law enforcement officer, as a member of the clergy, I have the experience running towards challenges that others would soon run away from. I'm a father. I'm a husband of 5 children. Yes, 5 children. A pastor, a public safety officer, and a Democrat. And I'm a product of a public school education. I reside here in Fairfax County and have for over 10 years now. Now, let me tell you why I'm running. I'm running because I'm up to the task to run.
Your time is up.
All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to share. And I look forward to sharing more.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I wanted to remind everyone, as Queenie Cox reminded us, that this is independent. This is fair. So let's be careful what we put in the chat. This is not, we're not out campaigning. We just want to learn and understand and who's coming up to represent our area. So let's just be mindful that this is independent and it's fair. So we want to be fair to all. Thank you. So our next candidate, who we are excited to hear from, is Story Zimmerman. Story, we look forward to hearing about you. And remember, you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And thank you all for being here. I want to take a moment to thank Ms. Queenie Cox for all of her hard work in organizing this event, as well as a thank you to Ms. White and for the Women League of Voters for making this possible. I'm Story Zimmerman, and I'm running to be your next Mount Vernon representative to the school board. I'm not a politician. I'm a military spouse to a retired soldier, a mother to a soon-to-be rising 9th grader at West Potomac High School, and I've been an educator in and out of the classroom for the last 20 years. I'm running because we need to get back to learning. I'm certain that Fairfax County Public Schools has the capacity to provide a world-class education, but our top priority must be to focus on the most important of our educational system, and that's our students. We must renew our commitment to academic excellence. The FCPS average SAT scores are at their lowest level since the 80s and early 90s. Getting rid of the modified grading system would be a great start. Our standards and expectations should lift the floor and remove the ceiling, not lower them. We must take the lead in Virginia and ensure all students are literate and reading on grade level by the time they leave elementary school. Next, every student should have access to the same world-class educational opportunities that will enable them to graduate and live independent, fulfilling lives. We should be embracing parental involvement and decision-making with open arms throughout every level of the Fairfax County public school system. We need a return to fiscal responsibility. The FCPS budget has ballooned by almost 65% in the last decade, but educational outcomes continue to decline. What is happening in our schools is not because of a lack of money, it is an issue of priorities. Learning will not take place in spaces that are unsafe and unsecure. We will not be able to keep highly qualified teachers and staff in our schools if they do not feel safe. We must ensure safe and secure learning and transportation environments for all and support school administrators and teachers in the conduct of discipline in their classrooms and at their schools. Our American public school system was once the envy of the world. With hard work, involvement, and dedication, it can be that way once again with Fairfax County schools leading the way. This is why I'm running. We must do better. Our children are counting on us.
Thank you so much. And now for the questions. Again, we'll start in alphabetical order. So candidate Matea Dunn, your question is first. That question is, what made you decide to run for a seat on the Fairfax County Public School Board at Mount Vernon as a Mount Vernon representative?
Well, I appreciate the question. I'm a doer. You know, other people may be better talkers than me, but I have been actively involved in this community for the past 10 years. When Karen Garza, the superintendent back in 2015, threatened to eliminate high school sports, language immersion, and music education, I was just a dad, coaching soccer, going to PTA meetings, working my day job. But I decided to stand up and fight because I knew that these programs, especially high school sports, make the difference for many kids who may not succeed inside the classroom, but find success outside the classroom. And so because I stood up and fought, we still have these programs here today in Fairfax County. Later, I fought to make sure that we clarify the roles and responsibilities of school resource officers, remove them from any involvement in school discipline so that we can end the school to prison pipeline. I also stood up to oppose Governor Youngkin's whitewashing of our history. And as a result of my advocacy, one of only about 100 people in the entire Commonwealth who advocated against, now we have revisions that restore some of the deletions that they put in place. So I have been actively fighting in the trenches year in, year out to make sure that there are full funding for our schools, increased pay for our teachers, and increased resources and programming for our students. Because of that history of advocacy, when Karen announced her retirement, I decided to step forward and tried to serve the community to leave it a little better than I found it.
Perfect. And now I'm going to ask the same question to Reverend Candidate Sims. What made you decide to run for the seat on the Fairfax County Public School Board as a Mount Vernon representative? Candidate Sims?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. I decided to run because I want to protect public education, because public education is vital. The Mount Vernon district is a majority minority district. I think we all know that. And it's one thing to talk about the experiences of people in a district or to read about the experiences of the people in a book. But I earnestly believe that the best experience is a lived experience. The most important thing that we have is the people that we have the privilege to serve. I have lived the experiences that many Mount Vernon families are experiencing today, and I've been able to overcome them. A representative on the school board should really understand and have a perspective of the people from whom they're going to have the privilege to serve. Diversity, equity, inclusion are important in establishing and maintaining communities of trust. This should exist to be a reality and not just a buzz phrase that people use when they want to get elected. This is something that at every level of government, we really need someone who we can trust, someone who is a person of integrity, and someone who has the experience leading people and walking with people through crisis. So that's why I decided to run, so I can be someone who represents the district for whom I have the privilege to serve. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And Representative Zimmerman, I'm so sorry.
that's okay.
What made you decide to run for the seat on the Fairfax County Public School Board as a Mount Vernon representative?
Well, as an educator and a coach and a mentor, I've been involved in the betterment of our children for most of my life. And I believe that all kids, all children, all students deserve a world-class education that ensures they reach their full potential. I really do believe that the Fairfax County Public School System has the capacity to provide this world-class education, but we need to make sure that our priority is on the students, that our priority is on every student receives that benefit and those resources to become fully functional, critical thinking, responsible constituents of society when they graduate from our high schools. And when I saw that our current Mount Vernon representative wasn't seeking re-election, I felt that it was my civic duty to throw my hat in the ring and run for school board. And, over the past decade, looking at a budget that has increased almost 65%, but our student performance has continued to decline, and highly qualified teachers and staff are leaving our schools, and our children don't feel safe in their classrooms. We've got to do better. Our children are counting on us. And, learning is my top priority, and it should be everybody else's as well. And we need to get back to learning in our schools. And I want to make sure that that Fairfax County Public School System reprioritizes its focus on the fundamental academic skills necessary to ensure that our students have a strong basis for learning throughout the rest of their lives.
Awesome. And candidate Zimmerman, stay right there. We have a question in the chat. So I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to start with you first, and then we'll go to Reverend Sims, and then we'll go to candidate Dunn. This question from the chat says, endorsements are an important part of political campaigns. Could each candidate share who has endorsed their campaigns, and also share if they have received any endorsements that have since been retracted and requested to be removed from their platforms? And I'm going to ask our leader, is that an appropriate question to ask?
No, I think it could have been maybe reworded better, but I don't think for this particular form it would be appropriate to ask that particular question.
Okay, thank you. Nathan Kicker, I apologize. We will not be able to address that question at this time, but what we could do is write that question down, and possibly we can respond in another way. Thank you. Let's see if there's any more questions in the chat. None at this time. So, candidate Zimmerman, the next question for you would be, change some things around. What are your qualifications? Well, you've already answered that question. I'm not going to answer that question. Both of you all have done that. That's a great one. But in an era of more limited financial resources, how will you enlist support for bond issues of public school spending from conservative voters or taxpayers with no children in the public schools?
I think you go right back to that. This is that in educating our kids is not just an issue for us now, but it's going to be an issue for us as we get older, because these individuals are going to come in and they're going to be the leaders of our communities and of our states and nations. And it's imperative, even if you are a person that does not have kids in the school system or never had kids in the school system, these kids are going to be the ones who are going to be our next leaders. And we need to make sure that they are given the necessary foundational academic skills so that they can go out there and do wonderful things for us, and make sure that they are responsible constituents of society, that they're critical thinkers, that they are constructive skeptics, and that they have those skills so that they don't they don't fall through the wayside. You know, right now in this country, we have approximately 70% of the students that enter into fourth grade are not proficient on the reading level. And you know, we need to hit those points home and let people know that the investment is not just one day or a couple of year thing. It's for, you know, for the rest of their lives and ours.
Do you think that could be eradicated through some early education like Head Start, more money and more value in Head Start and some other programs?
Well, interestingly enough, the Virginia Department of Education, in support with the 2022 General Assembly, just passed the Virginia Literacy Act. And they are the goal is to have, starting in 2024 to 2025. I'd like to see it start sooner here in the Fairfax County Public School System, but is to have every kid when they leave elementary school reading at a proficient level. And I think it's totally doable if we make that a priority.
Awesome. We would go to Reverend Sims, candidate Sims, same question. In an era more limited financial resources, how will you enlist support for bond issues of public school spending from conservative voters or taxpayers with no children in the public schools?
Thank you so much for this question on tonight. Listen, when we talk about leadership and someone who's going to serve in a position of leadership, I would use my ability as being a community leader, being someone who's into building bridges, to let people understand that we all of us, the entire community, all community stakeholders have a vested interest in investing in our next generation. We can have policies, we can have regulations, but the most important asset that any organization has is not the system, it's the people. It's the people that deserve to have the investment so that we can prepare our children to go out and be productive citizens when they matriculate through their education within FCPS.
Thank you. And candidate Dunn, same question. Do you need me to repeat it? I think you've heard it. You okay?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, great. I figured.
So I have experience directly relevant to this. In 2017, I fought to pass the meals tax because the meals tax, although not a great name, is something that is in all of our surrounding jurisdictions and even jurisdictions like City of Fairfax within Fairfax County. It offered the promise of up to $100 million more in funding for FCPS. And not relying on property taxes. Property taxes are a great burden on people who are retired, people living on fixed incomes. And when we rely, 70% of the county's budget comes from property taxes. That is not sustainable because you create a tension between the schools and the retirees and people living on fixed incomes. And we already have an affordable housing crisis in this country and in this county. We need to make sure that the cops, the firefighters, the teachers who provide the high quality of life here are also able to live here. And so I would look to diversify our revenue, but we also know that the schools are the economic engine of this county. We know that employers from around the world come to our county because of its diversity and the strength of its school system. So we need to make sure that we're spending money wisely and stretching every buck as far as it will go to achieve maximum return on investment. I also want to mention that I have several years of managerial expertise. I helped to build a $400 million federal agency from scratch and to turn around a broken $2 billion agency as the COO. I have that kind of managerial expertise that I will bring to FCPS to ensure that we have a well-managed school system that is efficient and effective at what it's trying to achieve, which is the world-class education for every student, plus supporting services to make sure that all those students have the mental health and other resources they need to succeed inside and outside the classroom.
Thank you. We have two hands raised, and then we have some other questions in the chat that I think are important. So let's hear from Christopher Walker. Your question? We can't hear you. Okay, I think maybe we can't hear you, Christopher Walker. Okay, let's move on to Robert Rigby.
My apologies.
Jackie.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
My apologies that my camera seems not to be functioning. I was a longtime educator at West Potomac High School, and I felt very much that the school board relieved the overcrowding. But I also felt that our students continue to learn, that they learn responsibility, and that we do have a world-class education system in Fairfax County. May I ask the candidates to speak to how the schools in the Mount Vernon district do achieve that world-class learning, or how they don't specifically?
We'll start with candidate Dunn. Did you hear her question?
Yes, I did. Thank you for the opportunity to respond. So I think you have to start at the very beginning with universal pre-kindergarten. Now, the state has offered money. The county hasn't taken them up on it because there's a 4-to-1 match. But universal pre-K is so essential because it helps to reduce that academic achievement gap at the very outset of the school education process. You also have to have summer camps, reading accelerator and math accelerator programs for kids who are falling behind. We need to make sure that during the summer they catch back up, and so that they can stay at or above grade level. Now, grades 1 through 3, they're learning how to read. Grades 4 through 6, they're learning how to comprehend. So you got to make sure, especially at that grades 1 through 3 level, that you're keeping them at grade level, whether they're into advanced academics or they have some special needs. You have to provide all of the support services so that every kid is staying on track so that we cannot have any grade promotion in FCPS. Once you get to middle school, you need to make sure that you have robust educational opportunities, including advanced academics, AAP centers at every middle school. Right now, South County Middle School does not have an AAP center, and it should. Once you get to high school, I think you need to expand dual enrollment programs and career and technical education. All 3 of my children participated in JROTC at West Potomac, and it changed their lives for the better, made them more confident, more prideful in their ability to succeed both inside and outside of school. And I think for that dual enrollment, it's a great opportunity to enable every student to graduate from high school with an associate's degree in a variety of different subjects. So we need to make sure both from the beginning all the way to the end that we're preparing our students for either entry into the workforce, entry into the military, or higher education. And that we're constantly saying, how can we do that most efficiently and borrowing the best practices, lessons learned from the best school systems in the world, such as Singapore and Finland. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Reverend Sims.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to respond to this question. Look, it's great to have programs, and we need it, and we need to make sure that our children at every level certainly have equal access to these things. But some of the realities that we're finding as I'm going out and talking to citizens is that there needs to be both equity and inclusion when we talk about these types of programs. If it's not something that's accessible to everybody, no matter where you live, then that's a problem that we need to make sure that we can address. There are many academic programs within FCPS, but there's not equal access to those programs to all communities, particularly communities of Black and Brown folk, particularly the Black community. And I want to say this point that life has taught me, and talking with my fellow constituents has taught me this: equal access does not always equate to equal opportunity. Equal access does not always equate to equal opportunity. And so if this is not something that everybody in the public school system has access to, then there's still much more work to be done in that particular area. So I think we need to start by building a system that ensures that there's equity and inclusion, there's equal access to all of these programs, so that everybody can have the same opportunity, same access, and consideration of the issues that are going on in communities such as Gum Springs.
Awesome. And candidate Zimmerman, would you address that question as well?
Well, first, I just want to compliment. Thank you, Robert, for the question. I appreciate that. I think one of the things that we're kind of losing here too, though, programs and all of that are great, but if we don't have the talent, the recruiting the best teachers and keeping them in our classrooms to be able to teach, it doesn't matter how many programs and how much money we spend on this or that. If we can't attract the talent and keep the talent in our classrooms, keep the teachers in our classrooms, it doesn't make a difference. And one administrator that I have spoken with, basically, he said, if you have a kid that isn't performing at grade level, you give them to me and I'll put them in a classroom with a great teacher and they will be on grade level by the end of the year. So we really do need to focus on recruiting and retaining the best and continuing to advocate in support of top pay and benefits for our educators, bus drivers, and support staff should be a priority. But then also, I just say instead of trying to, I think the school board right now has spent about $500,000 on hiring a PR firm out of Berkeley, California to try to define the term equity. You know what? I'll define equity. It's every student matters. Every student should have access and resources to a world-class education. And the Fairfax County School data already shows us where we're having issues, and we can do targeted strategies for those schools and those communities that need to have more resources and more help. And, and going back, 70% of our kids nationwide are not reading on grade level by fourth grade, 32% here in the state of Virginia. And I really think it needs to be a focus and a priority. And I'm glad that the state of Virginia is taking it so seriously with the passage of the Virginia Literacy Act here with the 2022 General Assembly. I think that's going to make a huge difference, because we know that kids that cannot read on grade level by third grade are 3 times more likely to be disciplined, have discipline issues, and and not graduate.
And we all know that the pandemic made that even harder our kids are struggling even more. Now go back to Christopher Walker. Are you ready to present your question? He's still on. There's a message in the chat. So if you want to just put yours in the chat, that would be great. I like to get these in the chat because they're fresh and everyone is here. The other question that was raised in the chat, did the current board get new admissions policy for Thomas Jefferson High School, TJHSST, right? Or if not, what would your charge be? And we will start with candidate Dunn.
So I think the school board took a very wise approach when they implemented the changes to the admissions policy at TJ. Historically, the Mount Vernon district had only had a very small number of people admitted to TJ. And so the previous testing regime was very flawed. And what they did was they adopted the same program that George W. Bush pioneered in Texas. Now, I would never recommend adopting anything George W. Bush did, because he was Trump before Trump. But what he did was every high school in Texas had essentially, I believe, the top 5% or top 10% of students automatically guaranteed admission to the University of Texas public university system. Now, that's something that we've done at TJ, and the results in terms of getting more Mount Vernon district students admitted into TJ were successful. So that is in alignment with the One Fairfax policy, where you're trying to ensure greater equity, greater representation, greater inclusion. I think we face certain challenges in the coming months and years, because the Supreme Court is currently considering a challenge to Harvard's admissions policy, and what the outcome of that, and we all know that we have an extremist, militant Supreme Court, we can expect that that will have roll down effects on FCPS, and so we'll have to look at it at that time. But for right now, it's had positive effects on the composition of the TJ student body. There's been only increases in GPA and positive data, so there's nothing to support that it's been detrimental to TJ or its student body one bit.
And candidate Zimmerman, can you address that question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. You know, I'm not a fan of lowering standards. When we do that, when we have a system that lowers standards and expectations, it destroys hope. And without standards, no one advances. I feel that students strive to want to do better and want to do the best. And you know, I feel that with all of the other measures implemented that we can implement in making students successful, that all of them will shine, and it will be you know, we won't have to change standards or change testing to get students into TJ. And you know what, I'll even say that all of our high schools will be just as good, if not better, than Thomas Jefferson.
And candidate Sims?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. Yes, I do believe that the school board did get that correct. Going back to the issue of equity and inclusion, the school board successfully got the test that was required to get into TJ removed. And also there was a $100 fee that persons had to pay to apply to get into TJ. Now, one of the things that we have to understand about the community when we talk about equity and inclusion, particularly for communities that are Black and brown, we don't have every school that has equal access to academic programs. And so to have a standard that excludes some part of the community that receives public funds is something that is not right. And so, yes, to your question, to the question that was provided, they got that right on TJ. It did not bring merit down. Merit is still up there. You still have to be able to academically be able to qualify to get into TJ. But removing those two things remove barriers that allowed others, particularly in the Black and brown communities, to have access to TJ. So I think they did a great job. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. And then we have another question. It says, as a longtime educator at West Potomac High School, I think the students continue to learn responsibility and to receive.
That was me. That was me. I already asked that.
Okay. Do you want to continue?
Can I follow up? Yes. I still haven't heard in what way our kids are not learning, and in what way FCPS is not a world-class education, or how we've lowered standards. I think we're still up there, and I'd like to hear specifically from Ms. Zimmerman, how it makes teachers not want to work for FCPS if we hear that we've lowered standards, we're not doing a good job, kids aren't learning. So how do we retain and recruit staff if we're saying you people don't do a good job?
So let me read the question, candidate Zimmerman, as she put it in the chat. It says, let's see, I think that the students continue to learn responsibility and to receive world-class education at this point. To all candidates, in what ways specifically do the Mount Vernon district achieve, oh man. I hit the wrong button. How do they achieve?
How do we achieve a high-quality education?
A high-quality education.
Ms. White, I think Robert,
See it.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think I kind of get what he's saying, and Robert, if I don't, please please forgive me. But yes, I do believe that the Fairfax County Public School System has the capacity to provide a world-class education. I have concerns. Our SLL scores have dropped 16% since 2018. Our pass rates for minority students have decreased 20% in between 2008 and 2018. In between 2018 and 2022, the average FCPS SAT scores have dropped 27 points. So there are issues there, and I don't think just throwing money at it is going to solve it. Recruiting teachers and keeping teachers is a big one. Making teachers and staff and students feel safe in our schools. We have issues with safety in our schools, period. And and starting at the beginning, especially with the foundational education for reading with the kids, I think is just going to be incredible. And making sure that our curriculum, which we do, but it needs to be reinforced. That, and I believe that Matt had touched on it earlier. Our kids learn, and as an educator, you know this as well, Robert. You start concrete, you go pictorial, and then you go abstract, right? So as they move through the grades, that's what happens, and we need to make sure that our curriculum is designed to fit that, and that we're not taking abstract ideas and putting them in the classroom at third grade, where it's not going to make sense, and kids aren't going to be able to grab onto it. Everything needs to not only vertically transition, but also horizontally in the schools as well. So, Robert, does that answer your question?
I'll think on that. I'm hoping that we didn't fail as teachers. I don't think we did.
Before the next question comes up, it would be greatly appreciated if the attendees, as you're chatting amongst yourselves in the chat box, could you please stick to the issues and not about a specific candidate, not whether you support that candidate, all of that, because we really are trying our best to make this a nonpartisan forum for you to obtain information. And sometimes just attending one forum, and this is not a long forum, you may not be able to make an intelligent decision that this is the candidate for you. This is just the stepping stone for the next forum for you to be able to form, much complex questions for these candidates. And this is not a debate. This is just for the community to find out the positions of certain school policies and issues so that they can move on to the next step. So please stop what you're doing in the chat. Thank you.
Now, would you like for me to ask the questions that they have in the chat?
You can look at the questions, and that's going to be your call of whether or not you feel they are appropriate. But there are some of the questions that were also submitted that some people who are also on the call that I think that we should at least take, a few more questions from the submission, and then you can go back to the chat. And so, okay.
Sounds good. Okay. So let's go back, to candidate Sims. What do you see as opportunities and challenges for students in Mount Vernon District? This came from the candidates. This came a pre-question.
Okay. Thank you so much for the question here. One thing I want to address here, one of my platforms is Safe Schools. And my family has been personally impacted by the opioid epidemic that's going on right now in FCPS. And I believe that that's a challenge, and it's also an opportunity for us to really address this issue. My oldest child, while she was going to FCPS, got introduced to fentanyl, and we almost lost her to an overdose. So this is something that is very personal to me, that within our schools, we need to make sure that we don't ignore it. We can't say it's not an issue. It's an issue that needs to be addressed, and one that needs to be addressed head on. We must ensure that our kids are safe. If our kids are not safe, then the environment is not conducive for learning. That's a reality. And so that's an opportunity that we need to hit head on, combating the opioid epidemic that's going on in our schools. And that's going to take all of us. That's going to take heading it on head on. That's going to take informing the community, the students, the teachers about the impacts to families about this. That's going to take making sure that we have support for mental health so that we have facilities in place in our area to deal with addiction. That's going to take making sure that we have mental health services that are free. I know the board has already worked on that for our students as well. That's a priority. We can't learn if we're not safe effectively. So thank you so much.
And thank you for your transparency. The same question I will pose to candidate Dunn. What do you see the opportunities and challenges for students in the Mount Vernon district?
Well, I appreciate the question. I think there are a lot of opportunities. I mean, we have right up the road Amazon HQ2. We have Boeing that moved in recently. And so we need to connect these great technology innovation companies more to the Route 1 corridor. And I think Supervisor Lusk did a great thing with the Wish Center. He's connecting people who can get welding or other training experience right on site to plug into these companies, whether it's in the trades or computer coding and so forth. So we need to use the Wish Center as a model, expand it, and have more of those, both north and south of the current Wish Center location along Route 1. I think safety is a correct issue that Reverend Sims has identified. We need to harden the entrances to our schools. Now, there is a plan in place to do a security audit of all school buildings. That needs to be accelerated. There's also a plan to build vestibules in all our schools. But I met with an elementary school principal the other day. 2 years ago, they came to plot it out. Haven't heard anything since. That needs to be fixed. We need those vestibules in place. So they call them man traps. So people with a weapon can't get into the schools. We also need to put in place technology, like from Evolve Technology. It has, when you go out of a retail store, it tells you if you're stealing something. You can put that in place to allow students to come in, and with video cameras paired with AI and machine learning, they can spot threats even in a big crowd of students. So we need to use technology, vaping detectors in the bathrooms. We need more mental health professionals, especially social workers. We need to get to the recommended ratio of 1 social worker for every 250 students and 1 psychologist for every 500 students, because we have more mental health issues than we can deal with. And finally, I have met with each of the 3 high schools in the Mount Vernon district, South County, Mount Vernon, and West Potomac, and all 3 of those principals said the same thing. We have kids who want to get off drugs, but we have nowhere to send them. So even if a kid wants to get clean, unless they're rich and could go to a private, we need more public beds built with state and county funds.
Thank you. And candidate Zimmerman, same question. What do you see the opportunities and challenges for students in the Mount Vernon area?
I'm going to say that safety is a big issue. I've talked to administrators, teachers, and students, and a perfect example, my own daughter won't use the restroom at Carl Sandburg. She waits till she comes home to use the restroom. So I really feel that we can collaborate with the Fairfax County Public School or Fairfax County Police Department to place more resource officers in our schools. And just to give you a quick kind of analogy, and I agree with the vegetables, and I know that we have money allocated for that right now. It does need to be sped up, and we need to continue to allocate those funds to update, upgrade, retrofit, and enhance security measures, not only throughout our buildings and our facilities, but also our digital infrastructure. But just in having that armed presence at the school, it's something that's top of mind is the whole Nashville incident. And from when the call went out, from when the door was breached, it was 10:13 local time, and the police were there and neutralized the shooter within 14 minutes. But the shooter was still able to get off 152 rounds, kill 3 kids and 3 adults. And some of the information that's come out has shown that individual may have cased another area and decided not to go in because of the security. So I think we really need to look at maybe boosting that $400,000 to school security officer positions instead of $3.2 million to our Get to Green Climate initiative. Maybe put that school safety and a little bit higher of a priority. At least I would think that our teachers and our students and our staff would be a higher priority.
And you addressed one of the questions that were here. So we want to ask that question about school resource officers. Do we think they're needed? So I thank you for that as well. And there was a good question in the chat about overcrowding. This person says that she thinks that we can safely ask the question, and she's right, how are we going to address overcrowding at Carl Sandburg and West Potomac High School? So I will first address candidate Dunn.
Thank you for the question. I'm proud that I led the design and construction committee for West Potomac High School. When I took over that committee in 2018, the school was something at 120% capacity. They didn't have enough room in the cafeteria for kids to even eat lunch at the normal lunchtime. Kids had to start eating lunch around 9:30 in the morning. And that's not acceptable in the best public school system in the United States. There were also 18 trailers that smelled very old and musty, were not in the best condition. We need to have facilities to match the world class of our school system. And through my efforts and through the leadership of Karen Corbett Sanders, we got the money allocated through the school bonds. I personally led 3 school bond campaigns, 2017, 19, 21, to make sure that we had the money available in the Mount Vernon district to renovate that school. The renovation was recently completed. They're going to have a grand opening soon. And that has now caused a large enough cafeteria so kids can eat lunch at regular times, so that kids have brand new spanking classrooms, including brand new science facility and labs that can allow them to learn the latest state of the art. So Carl Sandburg, I live just very close to that. Carl Sandburg, as many people know, used to be Fort Hahn High School, one of the best high schools, not just in our county, but in the world. We need to look at how we can use those facilities more in a better way. For example, the planetarium, which used to be something to help kids shoot for the stars. Now it's a computer lab. So we need to refurbish that planetarium, re-inspire the next generation to look to space as we are competing with other countries in outer space arena. So thank you for your time.
You're welcome. I want to ask this question that's coming in check. I think this is really important, and we will address this to candidate Sims. One part of the question says, how will you ensure equal access to academic programs? And then also, how do we retain quality teachers if we're going to significantly raise teachers' salaries to be both competitive and match cost of living in Northern Virginia? That's a big one.
Thank you so much. Can you repeat the first part of that question? That was a compound question.
It was. The first part says, how will you ensure equal access to academic programs?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the program. So this goes to the point of equity and inclusion for me. So ensuring that we have equal access, it's really in the question itself, equal access, meaning that we need to have academic programs at every school. And that's something that we need to strive for. Every school needs to have the same access to these academic programs. Now, if it's not happening in the actual individual schools as a practical matter, we need to make sure that we have it at least within the pyramid, and then we have an infrastructure to support that. How do we do that? By making sure that we have transportation where we would allow students to be transported to those schools within that pyramid so that they would have access to those academic programs.
But also, I'm just going to also in having access, it may be there, but some students may not know. What is your thought process on that? That's coming back to your, is the question said, to ensure equal access.
Right, equal. So thank you so much for that follow-up. To make sure that there's equal access, we need to make sure, to your point, that everyone is aware of the programs that are available out there. So we need to make sure that the families are aware of what their options are. We need to make sure that parents and students, when they're being talked to by counselors in the school, that they know what their options are. And I think partnering with community groups, that's important as well. It's not just the school itself, but the school looking for other ways, like partnering with community organizations to ensure that all of our students, all of our diverse groups that we have are informed about what options they have. Because sometimes you don't know what questions to ask. You don't know what to ask if you don't know what's available to that point. So I would make sure that everybody is informed about what's available in terms of academic programs and look at partnerships within the community. Thank you.
And then the second part to the question is, if we are to retain quality teachers, are we going to significantly raise teachers' salaries to be both competitive and match the cost of living in Northern Virginia?
Thank you so much for that. So one of my platforms is serving teachers. And of course, a part of that is increasing pay. But pay is not the only thing, right? And when I've been talking with teachers within the district, pay is certainly up there, but the board right now is working on collective bargaining, which is important. It's the whole benefit package. But like most people, when they go to work, feeling that you're appreciated and that you're valued also plays a big part in what you do. So when I talk to a lot of teachers, they talk about how they are overwhelmed. There aren't enough teachers to do the work. There are a lot of expectations, but people are getting burnt out. And so we need to make sure that we have teachers and that we support them. And so I would work with my partners on the Board of County Supervisors, my state legislators as well, to look at potential incentives that would be available to get teachers to come and to stay.
And Candidate Zimmerman, I'll ask you the same question. How will you ensure equal access to academic programs? That's the first part.
Okay. Well, if we're not providing equal access to academic programs right now, and it's not happening, we need to change the programs and the implementation. And for equal access of programs, I really feel that in looking over the data, that if we identify students who are reading below grade level, reading is such a huge thing. I don't even think people understand what impact it has on lost wage estimates for dropouts. When they have low literacy skills, they just don't climb through it. They lose interest in school. But we identify those kids who are reading below grade level before third grade, and then we can help mitigate learning loss and redirect resources to help the students get back on track so they're reading on grade level before leaving elementary school, I think is imperative. And that will blossom all up the chain. That will blossom into their pictorial and abstract skills in junior high and then up into high school. And as Matt had touched on earlier with the dual programming in our high school, make that accessible to them too. And I think somebody had said something about overcrowding. That might be a way that we can really help with the overcrowding, is get these kids through that dual program in high school and associate's degree. They don't and have them go out and start being productive, responsible constituents of society.
And then the next part to that is the teacher salary. We're raising those salaries to be both competitive and match the cost of living in Northern Virginia. What is your approach to that?
The board is already working on that. If you look at the 2024 budget, they do have a focus on increasing teacher pay, and they've increased steps as well. So that's already in the works. But if we're not making sure that the environment is safe and that parents are participating, it's going to be hard to attract that talent and keep them there. And it goes back to also, we need to support the administrators and teachers in their schools and not tie their hands when it comes to being able to discipline in the schools and help mitigate those, from being just where a kid says something to then it escalating to where it becomes physical. And I think school discipline should address school-wide classroom and individual student needs. There should be broad prevention, targeted intervention, and development of self-discipline. And teachers need, like I said, administrators and teachers need to be supportive in the conduct and discipline of their classroom, because I've heard teachers say, you can offer me all the money in the world, but if I don't feel safe in my classroom, if I don't feel that I'm supported, then I'm going to find another place to go.
That sounds. Now, candidate Dunn, I'm going to ask you another question. The school budget has grown by 65% over the past decade, but test scores are declining. What action would you take to improve student performance?
A big part of student performance is tied to the ability of teachers to actually educate our children. And so it ties into your previous question. Pay is important, and we do have to increase pay so we're at least competitive, if not higher than surrounding jurisdictions. But beyond pay, there's the issue of workforce housing, that teachers who work here and sustain our high quality public schools aren't able to live in our county. Same with police officers and firefighters. So we have to address that. But we also have to look at the system. Instead of top down, we need to look bottom up. We need to ask each teacher, what are the issues that are distracting you from your core mission? And if you talk to teachers, and I've talked to dozens just in the last few weeks, what they'll tell you is most of their time is spent on administrative burdens that have nothing to do with actually educating the children. They'll also tell you that their efforts to create a classroom community are continuously disrupted by having to take different tests during the year, which can take 1 to 2 to 3 weeks. And that disrupts their curriculum. It disrupts their teaching. And so we need to remove unnecessary administrative burdens. We need to remove unnecessary testing and make sure that we're able to empower our teachers to actually focus on teaching our children, educating our children. We also need to make sure that they have dedicated class planning time. Too often the time that's allocated for preparing to teach, to educate, is instead allocated to different compliance training or other things that are outside of that teacher's core daily job. So we need to help our teachers in many different ways, and we can do that through strongly supporting the collective bargaining agreement. I was at the school board rally the night that was approved, and I believe that we need to view teachers as professionals and honor them as such, and we also need to stand up for them and view them as partners in the process instead of cogs in a machine. And by empowering teachers to educate, we will get better academic performance from our students, because our students are having teachers who are stretched too thin to the breaking point, causing many to leave the profession altogether, not just going to different places.
And candidate Zimmerman, this is a good question too. How would you plan, or how do you plan to work with homeless students? That's the question, but I guess how would you as a school board representative advocate for homeless students?
Well, they are one of the reoccurring sets of students that pop up as far as having issues of not reading on school level or reading on grade level and having discipline issues. So it's a valid question, and I appreciate that. We can work with the entities around here. I'll give you a perfect example. When I taught high school in Colorado Springs, I had one of the students lived in a group home, and she would travel about an hour and a half to get to school in the morning. And making the teachers aware, but also collaborating with the different entities out there that help homeless, like Second Story. I don't know if y'all know about Second Story up in Fairfax. I mean, they do a wonderful job, and reaching out to those entities to become collaborative partners, almost, in absence of if there's not a parent there, or if there is, bringing them in and really hitting the educational stool, which is bringing teachers and parents and safety in together. And they need to feel safe. They need to feel like when they come into the school that their needs are being addressed. And we can do that through counseling. We can do that through reaching out with partnerships, various homeless partnerships in the area. The sky's the limit. We only limit ourselves in what we can do to help our homeless kids, but it definitely needs to happen, because they are, when you look through the Fairfax County Public School data, that is one of the reoccurring segments of population that either drop out and aren't successful, or just aren't reading on grade level, or they're not doing what they need to do on grade level. And so I think the partnerships would be to continue those partnerships and bolster them. Does that answer your question?
That does. Well, it's a great question. A great answer.
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
Yeah. Candidate Dunn, what is your approach to homeless students, and how we can teach them and keep that and help them grow?
Well, thank you for the question. There's almost no issue more important. We have too many students in our schools who thankfully are no longer publicly identified as homeless, but who struggle with food insecurity, not having enough food to eat in the evening or on the weekends or during the summer, who may suffer from transportation insecurity. They miss one bus and they're not able to get to school for that reason. They may also suffer from clothing insecurity, meaning they don't have enough, they don't have a winter jacket. They don't have enough clothes for the different seasons. And so I believe that FCPS, historically we've relied on PTAs and volunteers to ad hoc efforts to meet those food insecurity, clothing insecurity, transportation insecurity needs. And we really need to adopt that as part of our core mission. FCPS has a $3.5 billion budget. It has purchasing power, same as Walmart. And we can obtain that food, that clothing, that necessities, including for menstrual hygiene, at low cost. Make sure that every school where there are students in needs has a pantry where students can come in without paying anything, any fee at all, can get whatever they need in terms of food, clothing, etc. We also need to make sure that we make aggressive efforts to cancel lunch school debt. There was an article the other day saying there was a teacher who raised $40,000 to cancel school lunch debt. I don't know why we're not having free meals at every school for breakfast, lunch, and dinner if necessary, for whatever community is necessary. We need to make sure that our students can learn, because a hungry child can't learn. They need food to focus and to be able to advance. So we need to meet the students where they are. We need to help them, and we need to bring in, again, more social workers. One social worker for every 250 students is the recommended ratio. That's not what we have now. We have a far sight from that. And my wife was a social worker working in community health clinics, helping to connect people who came in with health problems to transportation, to lodging, to all the community resources that are out there. So we need to increase those social workers' presence in our schools so we can help people who are homeless or have other needs.
Okay. This is another question in the chat. They would like for each of the candidates to address this question. Share your plans to rebuild public education in Mount Vernon after COVID. As we know, COVID has really put a toll on our students. And so let's start with candidate Sims.
Thank you so much for the question. This is a real issue. I know this personally, and dealing with my own children who are still in my younger set and still in elementary school in Fairfax County Public Schools. There is an achievement gap due to COVID, and I believe that it can be addressed by utilizing a couple of different resources out here that we have. One is free online and in-person tutoring services. This is going to take an all hands on deck approach, we all have a vested interest in making sure that this happens. It's going to take all of us to realize that we all have this vested interest to ensure that our public education system is strong and adequately prepares our children to enter into society. It can be done. I think we need to have robust and constant conversation with the community. Now, you can't just sit somewhere and say what the need is without talking with the people and understanding fully what the need is. And depending upon what community you're dealing with, the needs are different. Some people that I've talked to actually thrive better on an online platform, where we have others who were disenfranchised, who did not have that same experience, especially our students who have English as a second language and don't have the family support that really understands, because English is their second language, and many have parents who don't even speak English. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for us there, and I'll be committed to working to close that achievement gap by utilizing a variety of resources. You're on mute.
All right, Candidate Zimmerman, if you could ask that same question.
Sure. I think the school board is addressing it right now in some forms with the ESSER, which is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. It's the third round that's coming out in partnership with the Virginia Department of Education. They're offering money for tutoring after school and in school resources. I think that's a real big thing to help catch up with that learning loss. I'm going to go back to my broken record, and I'm going to say that identifying those kids that cannot read, we target them and we get them in a literacy program, and we utilize those resources, the tutoring, the resource staff in the schools, which some of it is allocated in that ESSER that third round of funding, that we will be able to get those kids back online and get them moving forward. I will tell you that I've talked to teachers and I've talked to students in the classroom, and they're kind of done with COVID. They want to go forward. They want to, be engaged in vigor, but we just need to make sure that we identify those students that are still struggling, whether they're English as a second language, or they're special ed, or they're just kids that didn't get that reading coaching and so forth during COVID. And we have the funds to do it. We have along with the the Virginia Department of Education, we just need to make it a priority.
That's good. Now I'm going to ask Candidate Zimmerman this question. It was in the chat, and it does connect to, I'm sorry, yeah, done. It does connect to the problems we have after COVID. What's your thought process on year-round school?
So I think year-round school is an option that should be studied. I believe in following the data, so I would definitely support an independent study to look at year-round schooling as a possible option. But we would also have to talk to families, because families have vacation schedules, they have travel schedules. Sometimes they have parents living on two coasts, et cetera. So we really need to seek community input before we adopt something as different as year-round schooling. But in terms of trying to make sure that we are remedying the learning loss, I think the first part, we got to realize that there's not just an academic component to this, there's a mental health and trauma aspect to it. My 3 children suffered terrible trauma from the isolation from their peers, and we had to do lots of therapy and talking about that to get them back on track, not just academically, but mental health wise. So again, going back to school, social workers and psychologists, those are essential to getting kids back on track psychologically, right? Having them be well prepared to ready to learn. We also need to identify which content was missed. And I do believe that we need to look more at summer camps, okay? And one-on-one tutoring. I don't believe in online tutoring. I think tutor.com, that contract, I think everything I've heard from students, parents, families, community members, it's a waste of money. I think we need to make sure that there are all these private organizations out there that are offering tutoring services. We should bring in private service providers if we don't have enough staff on hand. We have the money from COVID called ESSER funds that we should mobilize and mobilize the whole system as never before to make sure that every student who graduates is reading at the right level, is able to do math at the right level, and is well prepared to enter the workforce, pursue higher education, or go into the military. When Dwight D. Eisenhower planned D-Day, he mobilized that Army like never before. And we need to set out that objective to get every kid back on track and then mobilize through the superintendent and school board, the entire system to meet that objective. And I think there's a lot. Thank you.
And I'm going to continue with this question for candidate Dunn. So we talked about school loss. We talked about COVID. We talked about partnership. What are your thoughts on partnering with communities? So like a community church that would help those kids in that area, or a community, center that would be able to do school tutoring after school and help those students, but truly partner with Fairfax County Public Schools with resources and even, what we need to work with our kids. What's your thought process on that type of partnership to help us with the loss that we have experienced in our learning? And also, if you talk about mental health, how is that going to infiltrate from a financial perspective in the schools? What's your thought?
I appreciate the question. I'm a strong believer that strong schools make strong communities. Queenie was telling me how when she was growing up, she used to walk over to Walt Whitman but now students from Gum Springs aren't able to go to Walt Whitman anymore. I think that's not right. I think every kid ought to be able to bike or walk to their school, whether it's elementary, middle school, or otherwise. I think we need to bring the schools into the community and the community into the schools. Right now, there's too much of an arm's length relationship. I was told by a former president of the South County Federation, they can't meet in the South County high school library anymore because they need $1 million insurance policy in order to do so. That seems ridiculous to me. We need to make sure that we're bringing in the churches, that we're bringing in the nonprofits and all the local organizations. We live in a community of highly educated people. Why aren't we creating adjunct positions in our schools so we can bring in those experts? Just like when I was at law school, we had lots of government officials, people working in corporations who weren't full-time professors. They were part-time, but they were world-leading experts in those subject areas. In the same way, we can open up our schools to the community, to bring in the mentors, to bring in the organizations, to volunteer, because we should really be inextricably intertwined between the community and schools rather than arm's length apart. That's my position.
So you would say you're willing to provide, to really go before the board and have that changed. Is that what we're hearing?
That's correct. I will work tirelessly to make sure that community resources like churches and other organizations are able to partner with individual schools or with groups of schools, for example, in the Mount Vernon district, so that we can make use of those resources. Why wouldn't we use volunteers if they're available and willing to do the work?
And what about you, candidate Sims? How do you feel about, as it said before, we have kids are just suffering. And what would you do to make sure that we get those resources and work together as a community?
Thank you so much for the question. I am certainly about building bridges and doing what we need to do to ensure that all of our children get what they need. And so, yes, I'm in support of that, of your question, to make sure that we partner with our churches, with our other faith communities as well, to ensure that we're able to really not just say that we are, but to really invest in it, right? So it is an investment. And so because our children are our priority, we need to invest in that and take a serious look at how we could really, truly partner. It reminds me about the history of African Americans all over this country and in this community as well, where it was the church. It was the church, specifically the Black church, when we had communities that were not able to get public education have access. It was the church that filled in the gap to make sure that communities that were disenfranchised got what they needed. And we can go back to that now in this place now and do that very same thing so the church can do the same thing. So thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Now let's look at how many more minutes do we have for questions?
Well, We have time for one more question, and then we'll wrap up with the closing statements.
Okay, let me
Because-
see if I see something in the chat. Let me see if I see a question. Or if anyone wants to raise their hand and ask a question, let's do that now. Any hands raised for a question?
Last burning question.
Someone help me to see those that may be in the other section. There's something in the chat.
Well, Mr. Rigby, we're going to bypass you because you've already asked a question. We would like to
That's
hear
fine.
from someone. Okay, thank you. Oh, and someone did put something really, a great suggestion in the chat box, which I forgot to mention, and that is having the contact information for the 3 candidates so that the attendees would be able to reach out to them on their own. So one of the things that we will be doing is, because since this form is being recorded, when we send the notice out, we can also include the candidate's website and any other contact information that they wish to provide on how to get in touch with them. And
This is a question that came, go ahead, I'm sorry.
okay, no, that's about it. And if the
This
candidates,
is a good question that came in the chat, and it was also in one of the questions that were already presented. What's your view on school voucher choices? We'll start with, excuse me, candidate Zimmerman.
I really, I'm going to go back to especially what Robert had said earlier in saying, that he really feels that the Fairfax County Public School System offers a world-class education. And I'm just going to say that if we are offering a world-class education, we get there, we will be the choice, period.
Okay. Candidate Sims, same question. School vouchers.
Thank you so much for the question. If it's something that will serve our families and serve our students and ensure that there's equity and inclusion, I would certainly have a real good look at that.
And candidate Dunn, what's your question? Do you support school vouchers?
No, I absolutely oppose school vouchers. I
And
believe
tell us why.
if you look at study after study of cities where school vouchers have been implemented, they simply drain dollars from the public schools and will send the public schools into a death spiral. The only way to make the public schools continue to be a world-class education system as FCPS is today is to keep the public dollars in the public schools. I don't believe in sending public dollars to private institutions that are not held to the same standards, that are often selective in their admissions for religious reasons. They may not allow LGBTQIA kids in, or they may not allow special education kids in. That's been documented time after time, and that's not good for our society. We need to make sure that public schools, which are the foundation of our democracy, the foundation, our economic engine for Fairfax County, stay strong, stay world-class, so we can continue to attract employers to decide to base their companies here, to have their employees live here, and we can continue to grow as a wonderful, best place to live, and not just Northern Virginia, but in the entire United States.
Okay. I think that we have come to our 90 minutes. Sister Cox, is it something that you want each candidate to come and do one closing remark, or how do you want to end tonight's forum? This has been very informative. I think it's been great. There are some things in the chat that we just feel like maybe, a little bit more pointed that we won't get to today, but I'm sure we'll try to have another forum and we can do some more discussions, because this has been robust. It has been great information, great knowledge, and it's been great to know and get to know our candidates, candidate Zimmerman, candidate Dunn, and candidate Sims. Thank you so much.
Well, with that, Sister Jaffe, I would just like to say, first off, I thank all the candidates for taking the time out to participate in this forum. It wasn't a debate. It was merely an opportunity for the community to hear from them directly, their policy, their positions on various school issues, and also an opportunity for another organization to pick up on hosting a future forum, as our moderator Jaffe has stated. So because there were an awful lot of questions that were submitted, there were a lot of questions submitted in the chat box, and we also allowed the attendees to ask the questions by raising their hands. And so this was a great turnout. We just couldn't get to all of the questions. So hopefully some other organization will step up and keep it going so that we all can, revisit our position on which candidate that we would like to have represent the Mount Vernon District on the Fairfax County School Board. And I'd also like to thank the attendees as well, because without the attendees, we would not have been able to have this forum in order to share information. And so with that, this is not my last word. And that is that we should have the closing statements from the candidates, and then we'll have the last closing comments. So Jaffe, it's up to you on how you want to, who wants to go first for the closing statement.
Okay. We will start with candidate Zimmerman.
I say woo woo, go in reverse order.
Yes.
So I did want to add something really quick though. I just wanted to say with the collaboration, the parents and the communities are the secret sauce to learning. And so, that collaboration is really important. And I'd like to see that bolstered even anymore, because that secret sauce, man, that can make a big difference in a kid's life. So just to close, our American public school system was once the envy of the world. And with hard work, involvement, and dedication, it can be that way once again. From students to parents to staff to school board, we must all strive to uphold the highest standards and be responsible for our actions. This is not a right, left, or in-between issue. The success of our children is an everybody issue. And that's why I'm running storyforstudents.org. So that's where you can find my website, or you can contact me at story, and that's with an I, story@storyforstudents.org, if you would like to email me. And so that's why I'm running. We must do better. Our children are counting on us.
Thank you. And candidate Sims.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to close out. As a pastor, I have a heart for the people. The Mount Vernon district is a majority minority district. It's one thing, as I said before, to talk about the experiences of a people because of what you have read or what you have learned from talking to the people. But I have lived the experiences of many of the people who are in the Mount Vernon district right now. I personally know because I share with them in those experiences. A representative is just that. The role of a representative is to represent the voices of the people whom you have the privilege to serve. Not to say and do what you want to do, but to go back and be the voice of the people. How can you be the voice of a people whom you don't understand? And I believe that the best experience is literally a lived experience. I have lived the experiences of many of the families. From homelessness, I've lived it. We talked about shelters, I've lived it. We talked about unsafe schools, I've been there. We talked about violence, I've been there. I've lived all of it. And so diversity, equity, and inclusion are important in establishing and maintaining communities of trust. You cannot have true community if you don't have trust. This should exist to be a reality and not just a buzz phrase. In my campaign for Mount Vernon District Representative, I look forward to listening to all of the Mount Vernon community, the parents, teachers, residents, and community stakeholders, to ensure that we build an inclusive, equitable, and safe public school system. You can find more information about my campaign at simsforschoolboard.com. And I look forward to people reaching out and contacting me with your questions. And Sims is a name that you can depend on, and Sims is a name that you can trust. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And candidate Dunn, your last comments.
Well, I appreciate y'all for hosting this debate. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everyone and present my campaign platform. I want to say, I don't have a professional campaign manager like my opponent. And so I'm sure as just a PTA dad running a campaign for the first time that I've made some mistakes. But I'm committed to working hard every day, tirelessly, to ensure every child has excellent schools every day, every way. This is not a time for someone to be learning on the job. Okay, this is not a time for someone who hasn't actually lived in our community for more than a year to actually be on the school board for the first time. I have been in the trenches day in, day out, year in, year out for the past 10 years. And when we're facing a dangerous time in our democracy, as Joe Biden said today in announcing his reelection, where we have the governor attacking LGBTQIA plus students, attacking our history and attacking our schools, trying to ban or burn books, this is not a time for someone who's new to the system, new to the community, doesn't really understand the community. I've been in the schools.
Excuse me. Mateo, let's not drag in other candidates into your closing statement. We shouldn't be doing that. We've been doing really good up until this point, and I don't think it's fair unless we have a counter statement from the other two candidates whom you are attacking, which they may very well view that as an attack. This is your opportunity to talk about yourself, not about OJT. All of us have always been OJT, and so you can't, you just shouldn't say that. This is not the time. We're closing out, and let's close out on a good note.
Well, as we said, it's not a debate. We just want to get to know each of you. And I think tonight that you have presented yourselves in a fine way. We've learned a lot about each of you, and hopefully we have the opportunity to have this same forum. And it's a forum just to get to know who you are and to get to understand how you will enhance Fairfax County Public Schools, because it has always been top notch in the country, and we want to keep it that way. I am, as I said in my opening speech, I raised 2 children from Fairfax County Public Schools in this system. Yes, I was an active parent, and I will advocate that that's the only way. And candidate Zimmerman said, parents have to participate to make it. They're the secret sauce, as she said, and they truly are. So it can be done, but we can do that together and not as a debate. So I thank you for this opportunity to moderate this beautiful forum, more informative than it can be. And hopefully we can have another one, because we want to put the best in the school board so that Fairfax County Public Schools can continue to be top notch in the world. Thank you for this opportunity.
And with that, I cannot follow up with anything that our special and unique moderator has said other than thank you and good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you.